Welcome to the Storytelling Lab, where we break down the art and science of storytelling. My name is Bennett. I am your host, and I'm a filmmaker and an author on a quest to understand how we can tell better stories so that we can do better work and make the world a better place. Each episode, I host one of the world's best storytellers to help you understand how to leverage storytelling to increase your sales, deepen your connections, and serve your audiences better. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode, and I hope that you love it. Hey, Luke, welcome to the Storytelling Lab.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yes, absolutely. Just a normal day in the great US of A, as we were talking about.
Yeah, everything's fine. I don't know. I think everything's just chill now.
Yeah, well, it's another day. We'll see what happens.
Another day. Life will go on.
Indeed. So let's get into it. I want to just jump right into it with a rapid fire question. Once famously said that a short film takes a minimum of $25,000 to produce. Can you stand by? No,
gosh.
I have seen that dialogue. I've seen you partake in that dialogue. Let's jump into that, though. That is a belief. That's a narrative that many people subscribe to, that in order to make a film, to make any project, right, there is some minimum requirement, usually financial or monetary, that I need before I can do it.
Sure.
What's your take on
that? I think, sure, there are definitely like certain ways of telling stories that require a certain amount of money, obviously. But I think one of the things I've just noticed a lot over the last however many years I've been doing this is there's a lot of people who will talk about making whatever their thing is, be it a short film or, a movie or anything, really, any piece of art. And they'll talk about it for 10 or 15 years and it will never happen. And that's sad because they're like a talented person that really should make that happen. And it's because they have this mindset of like, oh, for me to make my movie or whatever it is, it takes $1 million, or for a short film, it takes $25,000. And yeah, that's just simply not the case. And to be honest, making the things for no money or for small amounts of money are more likely to lead to you getting that $1 million movie or that $25,000 short or whatever it is.
Do you think that's is that a typical imposter syndrome, analysis paralysis, any of these voices inside our head that are kind of like, we don't really want to take the chance? Or do you think that's a legitimate belief or philosophy that people have where it's like, no, if I want to do this story, I want to do it well. And in order to do it well, I need X amount of money, X amount of crew, et cetera, et cetera?
I think it's probably a little bit of both. I mean, I think sometimes there is the feeling of like, for me to do it right, I have to have this and this and this. And that's not necessarily a bad mindset in the sense of like, you want to do things well, but at the same time, I think not doing things is worse, and doing the things will obviously, like I said, lead to the bigger things. And so I think a lot of people get stuck in the like, I can't make something until I have such and such and such. And that's not the case. You might not be able to make that thing or that thing exactly how you want to do it, but maybe there's a world where you go back to the drawing board and do something else until you can get that made or something like that.
And it's not to say, it's not that black and white where if I am to take the chance and just go make the thing, I don't care about quality, right? I mean, there's a world in between,
Absolutely.
just flinging something out there.
Everything that I've ever made, we've put a ton of thought and work into making sure it was high quality on every level. Some obviously more successful than others, but that doesn't change your mindset of wanting something to be really good. It just changes your mindset of how you go about doing it. And for those who have no idea where this conversation came from, it came from at one point I did have an interaction with somebody on Twitter who literally said, it's not possible to make a short film that goes to major festivals for under $25,000. And it's like, I can name off the top of my head 10 people that have made short films for $3,000 that got into major festivals. So it was just simply somebody who didn't know that, you know what I mean? So, yeah.
It's worth, and not to pick on that person, but it is a common shared belief. And I just wanted to kind of like deconstruct it a little bit, because it's a lot of people at least have that feeling, even if they're not married to that certain number, they just won't accept it when you give them examples. They still feel that way. So let's flip it over a little bit. So we often hear this, I don't want to call it a cliche, but just this motto of like, just go make the thing, go make your film. A
Sure.
lot of people who have done it successfully. And I work with and am peers with a lot of people who are either in the beginning of their careers or aspiring or whatever. And for some of them, I don't want to speak for everyone, when they hear that from an established creator, artist, filmmaker, etc., it can be a little eye rolly or frustrating because it's like, yeah, it's easy for you to say, right? So we have to talk a little bit about what needs to happen to just go make your film.
Yeah.
What's your advice for that person that's like, all right, I've heard this enough. I've waited 10 years and not told these stories that have been in my head. I'm going to go do it. There's still some practical, functional knowledge or advice that they need. What do you say to that person? It's like, fine, I'm going to go do it this year.
Well, I think, and I understand that it can be a little eye rolly when people that have seemingly had success are just saying, "Oh, just go make it happen," like it's magic. But I mean, like honestly, it is how it is. You might not be making the same thing happen that that creator that's giving you that advice is currently making. But like I wasn't doing that 10 years ago. You know what I mean? So like
Right.
the things that I'm making right now, be it a short or a feature or whatever it is, I wasn't making 10 years ago. But 10 years ago, I did take the advice of like just go make the thing, and I made a sketch, like a comedy sketch for $300, and which was basically food and two extra lights that we didn't have. And it's like, so I do very much think that that is how you're supposed to do it. You can only get better at making those things by making those things, and nobody trusts you with money until you've made those things. So
Yeah.
it feels like it's this huge catch 22 of like, well, I can't do this if I don't have this, but they won't trust me with this if I haven't done this, and then that's hard. But at the same time, it's all about doing it. I mean, it really is. And so it's like, even when it comes to, I think people look at like take, I'll just use myself as an example, who does preach that you should go make it happen. The people that are working on my projects, and if it's a short where no one involved in the project is ever going to make $1 back, so it's a lot of favors or discounted rates and stuff like that. But those people that are working on that short are people who I've met over the course of 10 years and worked with. This isn't some sort of like, oh, you just magically call a super talented DP and they want to do your thing for $300 a day. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
these have been relationships that I've built over the course of a decade plus, who then later on I say, hey, I've got this passion project. It's a short. I want to tell it. It's about this thing that happened to me with my mom, whatever. And they're like, yeah, dude, I'm in. You know what I mean? But that wouldn't, I don't know that if I was coming out of the gate trying to make my very first ever thing that some other person told me to just do it. I don't know that I could call that DP and say, "Hey, you have no idea who I am.
Yeah.
Can you come do my short film for like no money?"
Yeah.
But I think people forget that there's like many years of work that goes into it all. You know.
Absolutely, and I think I'm so glad that you landed on the relationship aspect of it. Really having that supportive network, those co-creators, those artists that you collaborate with is imperative. It's everything, and I think that's such a great point to the person who needs to hear that, right? Is like, yeah, I've been working with these people in one way or another on client gigs or paying jobs for 10 years. So it's a little bit easier for me to say, like, hey, I've got this cool idea. You want to go bust it out this weekend?
100%. I mean, we did a movie. We made a movie that was like a super. I think we shot it for $200,000. We made a movie a couple years ago, uh, called Faith Based. It was like the satire of the Christian film industry, and we got Jason Alexander and Lance Reddick and Margaret Cho and all these like phenomenal name actors. And I remember people on Twitter or wherever it was being like, "How did you get this person for this much money?" You know what I mean? Like, how did you get them to do your little tiny movie? But it wasn't like I, making my very first thing ever, called an agent and said, "Hey, I'm making my first thing ever. Would Jason Alexander like to be in that?" That's obviously not how it happened. I, 10 years earlier, made relationships with those agents and managers probably when they were assistants, for all I remember, on a different project where we used a much less famous person that was their client. And they were like, we got this client in there. They had a great experience. The film didn't turn out to be a disaster. It turned out to be like a really solid thing. And that agent was suddenly like, "Oh, I like that thing that you made that you put my other client in." And then cut to keep that relationship going over the course of years and years and years, and then come 2020 or whenever it was, and we reach out and say, hey, you've known me now for a long time, we're making this thing, I think it's really original, it's a weird little comedy, would Jason want to like be in this? Is that crazy? And they say, I'll send it to him. I don't know. I'll send it to him. And then you're like, okay, he's probably not going to do it. And then a week later, it's like Jason's in. And it's like they wouldn't have sent that on to Jason 10 years ago, you know?
And that wouldn't have happened. We're coming right back to the theme of like, if you hadn't have just done the work 10 years ago, like jumped off,
100%.
and so what's funny is like, I'm currently a co-founder to startup. This is a first time thing for me. And I'm learning so much about the similarities between art and entrepreneurship in terms of like having to make mistakes and make them quickly. And it's all about reps,
Sure.
and we have this idea of quality versus quantity. And it didn't dawn on me until very recently in my career that like, yeah, to get to quality, you have to go through quantity. Like you have to go make the short piece, 10 years ago to get to this. And that's even more reinforcing of the point of like, just get out there and start creating stuff and not waiting for someone to pick you or pay you or select you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
That's exactly it.
okay, so the reason we're talking specifically is because of the success of the Crossing Over Express, which resonated with a lot of people, myself included. We don't necessarily need to go down that path. A lot of people have dealt with loss, and the general premise of like, what if we had one more conversation, struck a chord, to put it
Mhm.
lightly. What I'm curious about is specifically speaking to like whatever certain point in your career you were in when you did that. Was the pursuit of that particular story like, all right, I'm going to just take the ball and run with it like I want to take control of my career, for lack of a better expression? Or was it, I've got this story in my heart that I just have to get out?
I think it was a both for sure. I would say
Okay.
the story aspect of like have to get it out happened first, but it was kind of like, for anybody who hasn't seen it or know what we're talking about, essentially, my mom passed away when I was in high school, and I don't have many pictures of her. I didn't have any video of her, so it's been a long time since you'd seen this person. And on my birthday a few years ago, I got a text that basically just said happy birthday and had a YouTube link. And when I clicked it, it was this video of her, and it was just like, what is happening? And she's she's asking what I'd become, and she's saying she's proud of me and stuff. And it turned out I had this friend who his dad was moving, and he had found these VHS tapes that he had then cut it out, digitized it, and sent it to me. And for me, it, quickly after like the shock, maybe a month or two later, I was like, I should turn this into something. And at first, it was the first thing I think I ever like jotted down or wrote about it. It was a very like very hallmarky, just like recreation of that thing that just happened, like me
Yeah.
getting pulled over, and it was about as cheesy as it gets. But later I kind of went back to it and said, like, there is something here, because I would tell that story to people and it would very much resonate with them. And so I was like, all right, I should figure out a way to like turn this into a piece of art. So that was like the first thing. But then there was like, you know, I had I had never directed before, and it wasn't that I'd always longed to direct by any means. But I did have a curiosity about it, and I think that it's fun. Like you write things, and when they get made, it's very exciting. But I did have like a little bit of a feeling of like, oh, I wonder what something could look and feel like if it was something that I was the one who directed. Like, what would my thing be? Like, if somebody were to say, what is something that Luke really created look like? And I was like, this would be a good opportunity to do this. I also felt because it was so personal that every time I started to imagine asking like a close friend to direct it, I just felt like I was going to annoy the shit out of them. Like I was just going to like literally be at the monitor, like, well, what
Yeah.
if we did this? And then I thought, this isn't a feature. Nobody's huge money investment is at risk. I'm just going to like direct this one. And then I asked, because I was going to act in it, I asked a close friend of mine to do it with me so that there was eyes on the monitor and he could give good ideas and stuff.
Just to go back and from a personal tip, like when you received that message, like, do you recall that moment? Like, how did, what was the feeling going on in your head when that happened?
I think, yeah, I was just like, it took my breath. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it was
Yeah.
just like, you haven't seen somebody or heard their voice in so long, it was overwhelming. It was just like I couldn't honestly comprehend what was happening.
How old were you when you got it? The message?
When I got the message, I was probably, I don't know, 37, 38. I'm 41 now. This was
So
like 4 years ago.
so a lot of time had passed.
A lot of time, 20 years had passed, you
Yeah,
know?
that's wild.
Yeah. Yeah, for
Mm,
sure. And I think there was on the acting side of things, there was a little bit of not as much of a take control of your career thing, but the truth is, and I feel this way as a producer, is people aren't going to cast you in things. They don't trust you until they've seen you do it.
yeah.
That's just the reality of it. It might be a little different when you're, a kid or you're young enough that it doesn't matter. But when you're an adult, they have to have that trust that you can do this. And so I think for me, there was a little bit of like, oh, I'm not gonna. Why would I book that type of role, that level of like getting able to like chew on something really meaty, unless they've really seen what I am potentially capable of. And so there was that part of it that's why I wanted to act in it, like as opposed to just directing it.
Was there a little bit of catharsis as well, just to
Yeah,
process? Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, I lost my dad when I was young, a little bit older than you were, and I wrote, basically a book about the last, month that I spent with him for no one's eyes but myself, like
Sure.
just to process that. So I can understand that
Yeah.
wholeheartedly. When did you start to realize? So, well, walk me through the plan. I mean, because you kind of just put it out there, and that's what it's gained a lot of notoriety for, is like you just kind of put it up on Twitter and put it up on Instagram, and just were you just like, I'm just gonna put it out there and see what happens? Was that more strategic?
No, honestly, there was like no strategy at all. Well, the strategy was to do festivals, and so,
Yeah.
um, and I shouldn't talk down on the festivals that we did do. We did some great, amazing genre festivals. Like we didn't get into any of the Sundance, South by Southwest stuff, and I was a little bummed. Not, I mean, I very much am aware of the numbers and just how hard it is, especially on the shorts front. Like on features, when it comes to movies, most people who have gotten features into big festivals, including myself, the movie has been repped by somebody who kind
Right.
of got it to programmers or whatever. With shorts, it is more of a 10,000 blind submissions. You got to hope it fits the program, and it didn't. And so then we got into some great genre festivals that were great. But when it came time to release it, we got into this thing called Short of the Week, which I've always actually wanted to be on, and that was like really great. We were like, oh, great! I'd been rejected by them a bunch of times, so it was great to have it on there. But they put it on their YouTube, and I just honestly think that YouTube has taken such a beating from all the other social sites now having such streamable video or long form video. Like I have friends who have 2 million YouTube subscribers that used to be that every video they put out would have 200, 300,000 views no matter what. And now their view count is at 8,000, 7,000, And so I think that YouTube has just taken a hit. So when they put it out to their million plus channel, it did okay. It got like 10,000 views or something like that, which is no small feat. But a week in, I was kind of like, I think that this will resonate with more people. And then I just read this article that basically said it used to be that everybody would try to focus everyone towards one thing. So like even movie studios, they would release the trailer on their socials, but they wouldn't give the file to actors. They would have the actor repost that
Right.
link to get
Yeah.
all the thing there. And now that's not the case. Now they give the file to everybody because they're like, put it on your Instagram. Let's just see where it takes off. It's all about shotgunning it everywhere. And so I just said, fuck it. I'm gonna put it out.
Yeah.
And it was like the next day I woke up and it had 300,000 views or something. And I was just like, okay, this was the way.
So I was going to ask you, like, when you started to feel the energy of it growing, but it sounds like it was
It was quick.
the next night.
Yeah. I mean, even honestly, when I first put it out, it was like just seeing 30 minutes in, people kind of like starting to comment or reshare or something. And for being an 11-minute video versus like a 10-second cat video or something, I was like, okay, people are actually like watching it and commenting on it and stuff. So I kind of knew quick that it at least had potential to reach an audience.
How much has your family or your upbringing, your past experience influenced the work that you do? Obviously, plays a lead role in this one, but because wasn't your father a pastor? Am I making that up?
Yeah, he was somebody who kind of would be like an interim pastor, so he would
Okay,
fill
got it.
in for
Yeah.
pastors when they were off, and then he would and then he drove a bread truck as a like a pay the bills job.
Sure, sure. I grew up in the church as well, and I'm guessing that influenced faith-based, at least to some degree.
Sure.
Is that something that you find yourself doing frequently, or just in those couple of instances?
Yeah, I mean, I think organically, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like a lot of the stuff that I'll work on has some sort of yeah, I see it. I see it in the stuff I write. I think it's an interesting conversation to have. Like, I think religion in general and belief is something that still fascinates me, even though I no
totally.
longer really do believe. I find I can see the benefits and I can see the negatives, and I think it's an interesting thing to like try to dissect a little bit.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a reason why basically every culture in humanity has had some sort of philosophical religious
For
belief.
sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Do you take that like what's your take on that old cliche like write what you know? Like do you start from that or do you really just focus on whatever story is compelling to you?
I think whatever compels you is probably the best, but I will say I have found that the times that I can inject something that is very specific to me into a story, it tends to be the time that it is the best. It
Yeah.
feels the most like relatable or personal or original or whatever it is. Like even the Crossing Over Express was something that when I first wrote that script, and honestly, like even when we were in like post on it, like editing it, I had this moment where I was like, is this too specific? Like these lines I'm saying that are like so specific to
Mm,
me or this character talking about his, you know, the things that he misses or the things that he regrets or whatever it was. I was just like, this is so specific. Um, you know, he's talking about the Amy Grant album, Christmas album that they would watch, and like just these certain things that I had a few moments of like, this might be too specific. And then it turned out those were all the things that like I think made it latch on to people more because it didn't feel broad. It didn't feel generic. It felt like, oh shit, this person wrote this from the heart. Um, and I think that even if every story we don't tell isn't about something with our mom or something, it's there is a way to write stories where you can latch on to those things. And even like the script that's kind of people have been talking about a little bit last week, which we kind of set up this feature script that has nothing to do with my mom. It's like a kind of a I think original take on a zombie story. But even in writing that script, we tried to pull a lot of elements of like who we are and moments that you could really think to yourself like, what would I really do in this situation? What would I how would I be affected if this was my daughter, and like these things. And I think that made the story better. And so I think that just the idea is obviously king, but if you can figure out ways to make it write what you know, you're probably going to end up writing a better story.
yeah. Yeah, I think at least like the feelings that or the experiences that you had doesn't have to be exact events, but just
Exactly.
the things that you can authentically bring to the characters, to the storyline. I totally agree. Now you're just referring to Epilogue, I'm assuming,
Yeah.
the news that just came out about that. I did want to ask you a question about that. Well, can you establish for those listening or watching like a little bit about that story and what to expect from that?
Sure. I can't do too much more than
Sure.
what's already out there, but essentially we wrote this story, and our thought in writing it was that not every, most zombie stories we've ever seen, and it's a very tired genre. It's been a lot, but very saturated. But most of the stories we've seen either take place in the midst of a zombie apocalypse or we follow the start of a zombie apocalypse.
Right.
And this story essentially takes place 1 year after a zombie apocalypse has fully ended. Everyone's like rebuilding, everything's kind of getting back together. Um, and then you learn very quickly that a couple has kept their daughter hidden, who had been bit. And so it's kind of a zombie story with only one zombie that follows this couple as they trek across like a version of America where the humans are almost the scariest part of the whole thing.
Got it. Well,
And yeah.
I mean, that led me to exactly where I wanted to go with this conversation because, I mean, storytelling, there's a lot of different theories of how many plot lines there are, but not that many, right? There's just a handful. We see the same kind of storylines over and over again. So, as a writer, how important is it to you to find that unique angle, like in this case, for any story that you're telling?
I think if you can do that, that's the best. Like this was
Yeah.
one of the rare moments, this doesn't happen very often for us, to be honest, but like this was one of the rare times that we were like, oh, this is kind of a take on this genre that hasn't necessarily been done this way.
Yeah.
So that was just like right off the bat before we even wrote it, just a great sort of like, oh wow, I don't think we've seen this before. But to be fair, uh, I think that almost every story has been done 50 times, and
Right.
so I think there's something to be said about like we're writing a thing right now. We're like taking a TV pitch out, and I literally in the pitch talk about how you know there's a lot of tropes in sports dramas. Okay, so many of the sports dramas that we've seen fit into these certain tropes that we've seen a lot of times. But the thing about a lot of these tropes is that if you treat them, if they're good, okay, if they work, then you can kind of like treat them almost like cinder blocks to building this wall that's sturdy and strong because these things work if you can do it well. And so I think that yes, originality is king, and if you can think of that idea that's super outside the box, that's going to be your best thing. But to be fair, if you think of an idea that you're like, oh, I love this story, even though somebody's told a similar story, then I think the key is what we talked about before, and figuring out a way to insert the things that only you can write into it. So if I said, and this isn't what our TV pitch is about, but like if I said, whatever, I'm gonna make a basketball movie about a small town basketball team who's like the bad news bears trying to like struggle on their thing. We've seen it a lot. We've seen it in the Mighty Ducks. We've seen it in all these things. But if I could say, okay, I'm from PG County, Maryland, where I was the only white kid on this soccer team in a state that like is the most affluent black county in the country. It's so many NBA players have come from this county more than anywhere else in the country. It was a place that at one point had like a very high crime rate, but like sports kind of saved a lot of people in this place. And so, I'm going to figure out how to like tell some original version of it that I can specifically relate to. I think that's how to do it.
Absolutely. Do nowadays, especially, you're wearing a lot of different hats now that you're directing, producing, writing, acting. Which do you identify with like most or first?
I don't know. I'd say acting is the most fun because there's just way less work and stress. And like I take it very seriously and I do put the work in. But at the same time, acting is a thing where like you put the work in, you go play pretend and you're done. You
Yeah.
go home. And I think that's just fun. Like it's just super fun to play pretend like we did when we were 10 years old. So I would say I like it the most in that regard. I would say that writing brings me the most satisfaction in terms of
Mm.
like um, being able to spend a lot of time just telling stories. I think storytelling is what it's all about. And honestly, I can't speak too much to directing because I've only done it on the one short, but I did have a really great experience and plan to do it again. So maybe that'll maybe next time we talk, that'll be the number one.
Yeah, you should definitely do more of it, man. I think a lot of people resonated not just with the story, but just the performance, the look of that piece. I mean, I saw all the comments on it, man.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
trying. We're trying to turn into a feature right now, which actually
Oh,
does
that's
comment
sick.
on religion and stuff. So
Oh, that's awesome. How do those different roles and your experiences in those roles inform and influence each other? Like if you're writing a project solely, are you pulling a lot from your acting experience and vice versa?
yeah, I mean, I would say that even if you weren't planning to pursue a career in other things,
Yeah.
having a good understanding of those things goes a long way. So it's like for me, it all goes into play. I mean, like I'll be writing a script and I have the luxury as an actor to say I'm going to like say this out loud and see how this feels, or I'm going to like call actor friends and be like, "Hey, can we just like work on the scene and talk it out to make it feel natural and organic and real and stuff like that." And so I think being able to do that, or even from like a producer perspective of saying, how are we logistically going to do this? Those all go a long way in informing the other things. So it's like a lot of the best directors I've ever worked with as an actor were at one point in their early careers actors.
Yeah.
And it's like they understand performance, they understand what it's like to be on the other side of the camera and how to get what direction is good and what direction is not helpful. Um, and it's the same way when I've worked with a director who's also a DP, to be honest. It's like they know where that can, it's like, it's just, I think being informed of how all the process works helps you in whichever thing you're doing.
Or at the very least, finding great team members who can fill in those gaps.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm not like for example, a huge part of me directing the Crossing Over Express, when by huge I mean 99% of it was choosing the right people, both in front of and behind the camera, to say, and obviously to give them a clear direction and a clear vision of what you're going for here. But like the fact that I could go to my DP months beforehand and be like, hey, dude, if you have time, can you watch this, this, and this? Like, this is kind of what I'm aiming for here. This is the look, the vibe. Here are dozens of shots that I love from these other movies and TV shows and stuff. Like, I just want you to feel inspired by what's inspiring me. Now you come and do your thing. Like, you tell me, like, when we talked about shot lists and stuff, he's giving as many or more ideas on that stuff than I am. You know what I mean? Because
Yes.
and it's the same for like casting. It's like the two people in our short with me, Ron Song from Jury Duty and Dot Marie Jones from Glee. It's like that was all it was casting them. I didn't have to do anything. Like, yes, we would have her do different takes or maybe try to get something else every now and again. But for the most part, it was like, that's it. They're gonna come do their thing, you know.
Yeah, you surround yourself with the right people, and you have that open environment where you can co-create together with people you trust, of
Yeah.
course. Yeah, it's. I mean,
I
honestly,
remember at one point before we shot, like a week before we shot the short, I put something on Twitter that was just a joke. Oh no, you know what? It was like the day before we shot. I made a joke on Twitter that says, "Directing my first thing tomorrow. What should I do?" Like, it's just like somebody answered super genuinely, and they said, "Whatever you do, don't ask the crew, your cast and crew, for like advice or input on things, because they're gonna see it as weak and not trust you to have like a decisive vision." And that, to me, both when I read it and definitely after shooting the short, is the worst advice that somebody could ever possibly give. Like, it is the literal exact opposite. Like, yes, you need to have a clear vision and be able to say, this is what we're aiming for in this scene, and this is what we're getting. But exact opposite. Have a crew and cast that are incredibly talented and you
yeah,
trust, and bring everybody into the conversation. And if a PA has a great idea for a line to throw in there, listen to it. You don't have to do it. You know what I
right.
mean? But
That part.
it's like the PA might be like, what if she said this? And it's like the funniest fucking thing you've ever seen. I'm still going to take credit for that. You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
exactly. But I mean, why work with a great DP if you're going to like control what they do? You bring them to the table because of what they bring to the
Yeah,
table.
yeah.
That's funny.
I later looked that person up out of curiosity, and I'm not usually one to be like happy to see someone not having any success, but I definitely was like, oh, good. I'm glad that person is like not PT Anderson or
Yeah,
whatever. You know what
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean?
Their very next tweet was, "You must have $25,000
Yeah,
to
it
even think
probably
about
is.
doing."
You probably put that together. Probably is the same person 2 years later or a year later.
All right. So speaking of teams, partnerships, etc., clearly you've been working with Tanner for a long time on your writing. How important has that partnership been for your growth, your career, your storytelling?
I mean, it's been great. Honestly, Tara and I wrote our first thing together in the first year of the pandemic, and it was kind of a scenario where I had never written with somebody else,
Hmm.
um, and but we liked working together and like always had a good time and stuff. And we had an idea. I had an idea for a feature, and I said, would this be just fun to try, seeing how it worked? And we really liked how it turned out, and just kind of like kept it going. So it's great to have. I think the key to having a writing partner is to have because I still write stuff also solo. He does as well.
Sure.
But like the key to writing with somebody is to have somebody uh, who you kind of balance out with, like where you
Yeah.
might have like similar skill sets, but maybe you have different things that you bring to the table that the other person helps you and you help them, and together you kind of can be a good writing team. I think that if you were too similar or you were both, I'm incredibly hard-headed.
Yeah.
He's not, thankfully. So it's like if we both were, it would probably be like not working,
Well, it's a relationship. It's a partnership. The same thing. I mean, if it's like looking in the mirror, it doesn't tend to work
Agreed.
often. But I
Agreed.
was curious about that because I've been spending a lot of time writing lately too, and here in the dungeon by myself, and any partnership is challenging. But I also know so many writers that I look up to that are producing great work that have partners they've been producing with for a long time. So I was curious how that relationship is and the pros and cons of trying. That's a touchy subject. Like, hey,
Yeah, I would say the pros are that, like, you get their strengths. Like, for example, Tanner is somebody who just constantly has good ideas, just
mm,
weird ideas, like, and just original ideas, and so he's somebody that, like, on all of our scripts, just he very often comes in with, like, stuff that I'm like, "Oh, wow, that's a great idea,"
mhm.
and I'm pretty good at, uh getting it on paper and making sure that we finish. So it's like, uh, and I think those things balance each other out really nice. Where he can come in with an idea that's like, this is a great idea. Let me help execute it, and like it get to where it needs to be. I think the cons with any partnership, not just writing, is that you have to take somebody's input into equal consideration. So you might have a scene. We've had multiple times where there's a scene that I feel very passionate should go this way. And he's like, I just don't think this is the thing. And you essentially might have to cave. You know what I mean? Like you might have to either find a middle ground where you're both happy. That's usually what it is. Or you might just have to be like, okay, this is not the hill that I die on. So it's like if you really feel that passionate about her saying this, she can say this. You know what I mean? And I think that's just part of any partnership.
I know y'all recently got literary representation that was happening, a flurry of activity recently here,
Blurry,
Luke.
blurry. Weird week.
Weird. Yeah, great week.
Great week. Great week.
Yeah, proud of you, man. That's amazing. Were you represented before that or not?
Yeah, we had a manager who I love, still have a
Okay.
manager that I love. And honestly, like this also goes to show just like what it's all about.
Yeah.
The way this manager worked out in terms of, again, this is not just oh, you do this thing and 2 weeks later these things happen. She was an actor agent, so she
Mhm.
only repped actors at Innovative, like a decent sized agency, who I worked with as a writer producer every now and again to cast stuff in our projects. So I would 7 years ago go to her with a thing we were making and saying like, "Hey, do you think such and such would want to be in this?" And she would kind of help me on that side. And when we made Faith Based, I had quit acting for like 9 years or almost nine
Oh
years.
wow.
So I'd been out of the acting game for like 9 years. We make Faith Based. I end up doing a lead role in it still. And she comes to me in somewhere when it was like in post, and she says, "Hey, would you want to get back into acting?" And I basically said, "I don't think so. I don't want to go back to what I was doing 9 years ago. That wasn't like a satisfying thing." And she was like, "No, no, no. We're going to use this movie and we're going to go about it like a totally different route. We're going to position you in a different category and we're going to start over." And I was like, "Okay, great." And she was like the best thing to happen to me. And maybe a year into that journey with her, she said, "Hey, I love your scripts. I want to make the move into also doing lit management. I do not have relationships in this world, but I am you know that I'm a hustler. I want you to take a chance on me and do this." And I was like, "You know what? You're taking a chance on me as an actor who hasn't acted in 9 years. Let's do it." And to her credit, she hustled like crazy, like had scripts set up for us at Leonardo DiCaprio's company, at Dana Brunetti. Like she made these relationships, she got scripts to them. She was great, and it is still great. And so this, I think the recent thing was just a nice kind of like addition that is uh, nobody wanted to represent us until we made the Crossing Over Express on the agency side.
Why'd you quit acting for 9 years?
I had just been doing it all the I had been doing all when I moved out here, I did 6 years or so of all the awful things that you're supposed to do. So I did every bad student film
All of
and
them?
all of them, every non-union commercial, every awful thing you can do. And it just wasn't working great for me. And then I made myself the sketch that we talked about for a few $100s that was suddenly in the LA Times and the Hollywood Reporter and all this stuff. And I was like, this little video has done more for me than 6 years of traditionally pursuing it. But once that started to work and I knew that I wanted to make a feature and stuff like that, I just decided to put all my eggs in the writing producing basket for the time as a you know what, go in the door that's opening for you right now, embrace it 100%, and then I can always potentially come back to, if I ever wanted to. And I actually didn't think I would come back to acting. I thought cool, I'm just gonna keep doing this. Yeah.
Let me ask you a personal question. I know that you have kids, right?
Yep.
Um, when you're take those years off of acting, you're trying to create your own stuff. You're trying to put your own art and stories out into the world, which is never easy for anybody. Um, what is your approach to juggling that while being a good dad?
Well, to be fair, back then I didn't have kids. I got a five
Okay,
year old and an almost 2 year old. So
gotcha.
so
Well,
the
we're about
first
the
one,
same then, yeah.
yeah, first one was born right when we made, literally in the middle of making Faith Based.
Wow.
Literally, we had to push our stuff with Jason Alexander by almost 2 months between his schedule and my wife being 8 months pregnant. We were like,
Mm.
let's just push a week of shooting into July and not worry about it. Uh, but honestly, having kids has only increased my productivity in a weird way. And on one hand, it's like I have no time and I'm so exhausted and it's all those things. At the same time, I think when I do have time, I'm like, I got fucking 2 hours right now. I'm gonna write right now. It's just made it more productive. I give my writing partner shit because he's not married, he doesn't have kids. And I'll be like, how
Right,
are
right.
you not churning out 7 scripts a day?
You don't think
Because
about
I
it.
only have an hour and I'm
Yeah.
like, we're
You
doing the
don't
same
think
amount.
about it.
You
Dude,
don't think about it.
I think about the times before kids like, "What the hell did I do all
I
day?
think about it all the time. I'm like,
What
I
did I do?"
genuinely, what was my Saturday? I just didn't do anything.
Exactly.
Like
Yes, that. You didn't do anything, and then you went out that night to celebrate
yep,
doing not shit
it's
all day.
crazy.
Okay, last-ish question. I've seen you talk about this before, and I love this idea. I've a lot of people that I look up to share this philosophy of, we're in this weird space right now, in filmmaking where we're still taking these huge swings at $200 million films that are just tanking left and right. The populace, the people, the audiences are getting tired of seeing the same old regurgitated stories. Hollywood just wants IP over and over again. It feels like there is this pendulum swing back to indie filmmaking. Specs are selling again, et cetera, et cetera. The tweet I think you said, and I've heard other people say, was like, take that 100 mil and make
Mhm,
10 million dollars or what,
mhm.
25s. Do you feel like, and even with your own activity, what's going on, that there is this swing back to independent storytellers and filmmakers starting to, have louder voices again, for lack of a better expression?
I think there is. I think what's gonna keep happening is the creators are going to be more in control of their destiny as a business, in the sense of um there's going to be more niche stories, you know what I mean? There's going to be more things that can, it might be a smaller audience, but it hits them, it gets them, there. You see something like The Chosen or any of these bad Christian movies that make $1 bazillion, and it's it might not seem like a mainstream Marvel idea, but they hit that audience so perfectly. I think also what has to happen is they just have to go back. I mean, I think this is the tweet you're talking about. It's like they have to go back to diversifying, because I do understand that if you're going to, if you're strictly looking at a business sense and you're saying I can either invest in Thor 9 or I can invest in The Substance, there is a way 1,000 times better chance of you making your money back on Thor 9. So I understand that mindset, that mentality, because these people are just business people. They do not care about anything else. But I think that when you see something tank that costs $300 million, it's like they have to go back to figuring out how to. I mean, even in my own career, I will always have projects that are at different size level. Like
Mm,
like Epilogue.
that's smart.
Epilogue is probably something that would get made, that will get made for like $5 to $10 million. That will be the biggest thing I've ever been a part of. But that's not a $200 million movie. It's still a
Right.
small-ish movie for what it is. And then I'm writing something else right now for somebody that the only way it gets made is if somebody wants to make it for $100 million.
Yeah. Yeah.
Huge action movie. And then at the same time, I'm working on a version of the Crossing Over Express that I could go make for $300,000. Like,
Mhm.
and I think that the studios have to kind of do that too and say, we're going to diversify, have all these different things. One of them might hit. If that one tanks, it's not the end of the world. But like when they have 3 movies tank that cost $200 to $300 million, then they're done. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a great point of being diverse in the types of stories that you're creating as well. But ultimately, I do feel this swing back to it's like a direct to consumer model of storytellers being able to take it to their people, which is exactly why you're here. So, dude, and also with Epilogue, what great casting! I'm so freaking
Great.
excited about.
Me
I'm
too.
so excited about that, dude. I'm so happy for you,
Thanks, man.
dude. Thanks for being here, man. This was awesome and honestly, like really inspiring. I could nerd out with you forever about grief
Yeah, dude.
and all of those
Sure.
things about the Crossing Over Express, but I really wanted to have you on because so much of my audience are people that need to hear that sentiment of just tell the story, just get it out there and just
I
start
mean, dude,
creating your
there's,
stuff,
if you go back and watch, if you look up the Duplass brothers
dude.
short that broke them out,
Yes.
and it's for anyone listening, it's called "This Is John," and it's literally like they took their dad's camcorder, they went to their kitchen, there are no lights, there's no other crew, it's just the camcorder, and they made this video of Mark Duplass trying to record his outgoing voicemail, and he can't get through it, and he just does it over, and he does it 50 times, and he gets more frustrated and more frustrated. They literally shot it for $0, and it turned them into the Duplass brothers. And so I refuse to listen to the like, I need $25,000 to go make something. You might need $25,000 to make that thing that you're talking about, but like, go make something else.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Luke, I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, dude.
Congrats